At this point, every information portal is saturated with mindfulness content. But this show is a unique, unusual, curious take on mindfulness. Some of what you hear will be completely new to you. Let's dive in and take a look at the nature of the aware mind. I invite you to deepen your awareness so that you may be liberated and inspired. I'm Sarah Vallely, professional coach. I help people overcome anxiety, heal from past trauma, improve their relationships, and maintain better work-life balance. Our guest today is Emelda De Coteau, and she's been on our show before, back maybe last January. We had a wonderful conversation about shame, and I'm so glad that E is back on the show with me. And also, she as a graduate of my coaching program and a certified mindfulness coach, she does some amazing work in the world. She supports moms who are raising kids with health challenges. And she also supports moms who are dealing with their own chronic illness. E herself has a daughter who is neurodivergent. Emelda, I call her E, a lot of other people do. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. And thank you for the beautiful work that you are doing. You are really impacting so many lives, and so many of the practices that I learned in the coaching program, I use every day, especially around self-compassion. So thank you for your work.
You're so welcome. You really are spreading all those wonderful teachings as well. I'm so glad to have you here. Today, our topic is self-compassion. And before any of our listeners want to switch off the show, I want you to hear me out, and I want to address some of the arguments against self-compassion, because self-compassion can feel uncomfortable for people. And some of the things that I hear are, I need to be strong and tough it out. The way I would address that is the same way that I address anger. If action is more important than healing, then yes, being strong is very appropriate. But if you want to really engage in a healing process, then some vulnerability would be really helpful. Vulnerability instigates the healing process, and vulnerability is a source of strength in itself. Another thing that I hear people say is, if I am easy on myself, then I won't be as effective or won't be as accomplished. Kristen Neff addresses this really well in her book, Self-Compassion. She's the leading researcher who is doing a lot of research on self-compassion. And she says that the research shows that this is not true, that we don't become less effective. We don't become less accomplished when we engage in self-compassion, that actually the opposite happens. We become better at what we do when we do incorporate self-compassion. So how about you, E? Have you heard some of these same arguments? Have you worked with people who are a little bit resistant to a self-compassion practice?
I have heard a lot of those arguments. One of the ones that I hear quite a bit is that self-compassion feels selfish, especially from moms who are raising kids that are dealing with various health challenges and learning differences. They really feel like they don't have time to really stop and be self-compassionate. And this was something that I also myself struggled with too. You just feel like you have to be there for your kid and just be the best for them, and you really don't have time to stop. But you actually show up much better when you do give yourself that space for self-compassion, because you can then model that for your child who's dealing with these different challenges, health challenges, learning challenges. My daughter now will say, if she sees me getting upset, she'll run to me and say, "It's okay, mommy. It's okay, mommy." And she'll give me a big hug. So it's like they do pick up on the emotions and the energy that we give out. I definitely also hear around self-compassion, some of the resistance is the strength piece, that I have to be strong. And this is particularly something that I hear from moms of color, because we feel that in addition to dealing with the challenges of raising a neurodivergent child or dealing with chronic health challenges, we're also dealing with racism and other challenges. So to sit down and think about how to be self-compassionate, I don't want to give myself the space to do that, because all these other things take precedent. But again, it's that focus on pouring back into yourself so that you come from a place of inner abundance as opposed to being so depleted, because it just impacts everything. If you're not right, then your partner will feel that, your children, your work environment, and it just spills over. But definitely around the strength piece, around the not feeling like there's enough time. I think people feel like you got to be sitting on like a meditation cushion and like at this retreat and like you need all this space, when it really is just taking a few moments to really give yourself that space.
Yeah, literally just taking 60 seconds of self-compassion can switch the rest of your day around. That's so true. And I love what you said about modeling self-compassion to your children, because we can speak it to them and we can teach it to them. But if we're not doing it ourselves and giving ourselves that compassion, the teachings to our children aren't going to really take hold, probably. We all deserve it. We all deserve to take that break. I really do appreciate what you mentioned about racism and the extra pressures. I have a lot of clients who are women of color, and it's so true, that added pressure, but ever so more important to give yourself that compassion. And so, as far as what self-compassion is, essentially, it is a kind statement that you say to yourself. One example would be correcting shame. So being mindful of some of these shame thoughts. I'm not good enough. I messed up. And then following up with something like, I'm human and it's okay to make mistakes. That would be this self-compassionate statement. So that's one form of self-compassion. Another can be actions that you take for yourself. For example, allowing yourself to leave a place where you're emotionally unsafe. That's an act of self-compassion, removing you from an emotionally unsafe place. I just can't say enough good things about Kristen Neff. I love her first book, Self-Compassion. And she describes self-compassion as being threefold, having these three components. And the first is self-kindness versus self-judgment. So if you're judging yourself, that would be kind of the opposite of self-compassion. The second component is common humanity. And what that means is we remind ourselves we're not the only one going through and feeling these things, especially when this comes to some deep emotions of grief or sadness, that we're just one of many, many humans of many, many generations that have felt this same way. And so feeling that connectedness with humanity is part of the self-compassion experience. And the third component is mindfulness, not over identifying with the maybe negative things that we're saying to ourselves. And those of us who have practiced mindfulness for a good enough time, we get to this point where we realize so much of the thinking, these thoughts that we generate, aren't even true. And when we realize that, then we don't identify with them as much. We don't buy into them. We don't believe in them as much. When you're working with your clients and you're leading your groups, how do you introduce the idea of self-compassion? What does it mean to you?
For me, self-compassion, and for the women that I work with, really looks like giving ourselves grace and treating ourselves as we would our close family members, our friends, because so often when it comes to mothering and really showing up as a caregiver, we pour into everyone else first. So it's really beginning to water yourself and understanding that when you water yourself, that radiates outward and it really affects everyone around you in a positive way. One of the things that I really focus on when I share about self-compassion is that it helps us to shift from spiraling and really going down this long hole of I'm not good enough, I'm not doing enough, I could be a better mom, to really sitting with the fact that we're human and that, yes, we make mistakes, but we also love our kids immensely. And so what are the beautiful ways that we show up? How can we shift from self-criticism to self-compassion? And a lot of that begins with the way that we're speaking to ourselves. And one of the things that I try to share through When Motherhood Looks Different, whether on social media or when we do our Zoom meet and chats, is affirmations. I remember you saw this video because you commented on it. I forgot that Nye had a half day and we were like 30, 40 minutes late. And the teacher was calling me and I started to like spiral while I was driving to pick her up in the car, feeling so bad that I had forgotten because I'm usually really good about all the school calendar stuff. And then I just was like, you know what? You're human. You're doing the best that you can do in this moment. And that's enough. You know that you love your daughter so much. A lot of moms can relate to this. Not that dads can't, but, my audience is moms. So many people were like, thank you for saying that. This is something that really resonates. Because I think also in our culture, moms, we beat ourselves up because we're held to such a high standard. The world isn't going to give us a break, but we can give ourselves a break. And we have to, for our own emotional health, for our own mental health, spiritual health, we have to be able to speak those words of kindness to ourselves.
I loved that post. I was scrolling on Instagram the other day and saw your video telling that story about forgetting to pick your daughter up from a half day, which I think all of us moms can relate to. We've all done that at least once. And then you went on and you said, but wait, I do really care about my children and I am enough. And you gave yourself compassion in that moment and actually just brought tears to my eyes because it just reminded me of some of our personal coaching sessions where we were talking about, these same exact things and working on the same exact idea. You did such a good job of taking that pause and just stopping for a moment to give yourself that compassion. So could you describe what that pause is like? Like, how did you know to take that pause? What was the cue to say, hey, wait a minute, what was that like?
Thanks to your teaching, Sarah. You really taught me to listen to my body, the gut, and I could feel my stomach beginning to knot up. That's something that I have experienced now for several years. Whenever I'm anxious, I feel it first in my stomach. It's like this gurgling sensation, and I could feel that stirring up. I could feel my body getting tight. And that was the signal for me to stop and to pause. I did some deep breathing. I like to put my hand on my heart. If I'm like home and I can sit down or lay down, I'll put my hand on my heart and also another hand on my stomach. But since I was driving, I put my hand on my heart and I just breathed in deeply so that I could begin to soothe my nervous system. Because I think so much of what happens with us emotionally is also the reason why we do spiral and it's hard to kind of come back is because we're out of touch with that mind, body, soul connection. So that was just being able to listen to my body in that moment was the cue to stop and then to breathe and then to be here with myself in the moment. SBB, stop, breathe, be here now. And once I could be here now and I could connect to those emotions, then I could understand how to mentally pivot. That was critical for me, that just really listening to the body and then proceeding from there. And I think when it comes to caregiving and mothering, because we are so present with our kids, we sometimes lose touch with our own body and our own emotions. And that is a really critical piece to being able to regulate ourselves throughout the day and deal with different challenges is really connecting to the body, that mind, body, soul connection.
And that takes mindfulness, that awareness, that noticing. And I think noticing anxiety is one of the important cues for self-compassion, noticing those moments when we can feel our body tightening up or, whatever it is that we notice when we have anxiety. I can remember going out and doing some errands and realizing that I was going to be possibly late for meeting a client back home on Zoom. And yeah, it's just like you can tell your anxiety symptoms are high. And so that's time that I took a pause. It's like, oh, okay, how could I implement some self-compassion here and just validate myself? It's understandable that I'm having this anxiety because I really care about my clients. I don't want to be late. I don't want to let them down. And, I am good enough. What happened in that particular situation is the anxiety part diminished, and then I was just left with oh, bummer, it's going to be a bummer if I'm late, which was much easier to deal with. It wasn't as intense. It wasn't so much pressure on the body. I mean, you really are putting some pressure on your systems in your body and the thinking. So I want to invite the listeners to think about, what is your pause story? What is a time maybe in the last couple months that you took a pause? You said, wait, I need to take a pause here and see what I need. What makes it so difficult to take that pause? I can think of, this mentality to stay strong, to keep going. We don't have enough time. And how about just simply forgetting? Like we just forget that that's even an option because we're so distracted. We're so engrossed with whatever we do. What are your thoughts on why is it so difficult to take that pause?
I think it has to become a daily practice. One of the things that I spoke about when we did the initial podcast conversation was well-being anchors. You both begin and end your day with well-being practices that nourish you. And you can even do this in the middle of the day if you're a person that has time for that, like on your lunch break. For instance, a well-being anchor could be taking a walk in nature mindfully. It could be a devotional practice, whatever your faith tradition is, or prayer. It could be listening to music, just sitting outside in mindful awareness. So it's really beginning your day, giving your body, your mind, your spirit that signal to slow down. Because if you wake up and you're sort of reacting to everything all the time, the news, a text message, phone calls, then your body and your mind and your spirit have this message that you have to continue to react. And so then you're on autopilot as opposed to being in mindful awareness. So I think it has to become a daily practice. And then if you have time in the middle of your day to do a short meditation or some deep breathing or something else that nourishes you. And then when you get to the end of the day, how are you ending your day? Are you ending your day listening to the news or scrolling social media? And not that you can't be informed, but you want to do that from a place of inner abundance and not depletion. I think that's why so many people have a difficult time with that, because it's not a regular practice. And if it's not a regular practice, it won't be the first thing that you'll jump to. You'll jump to the anxious thoughts because you haven't given your body, your mind, your spirit that signal that it is okay to slow down. A lot of this, too, is really unlearning. We're in a culture that emphasizes hyperproductivity. And there's a book, Rest is Resistance by Tricia Hersey, that I think folks would really benefit from reading, because she talks a lot in this book about how productivity and how we show up and how you have to be strong and keep pushing through. These are cultural messages that are tied to capitalism, the economic system that we're under, and that are just also tied to the ways that we have internalized oppression. And we got to unlearn that and get free of that if we're going to be able to show up for ourselves from a space of calm, even as we're dealing with challenges.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I mean, if we really want to embody something, we want to incorporate some type of new mindset, new practice, we really do need to touch on it at least once a day. We need to have that connection and that daily practice. And it can just be 5 minutes. That's what I tell my clients. I mean, if you can just focus on these self-compassion or simple mindfulness exercises for 5 minutes a day, you will notice a difference, because it's going to start changing the way you address stress, the way you address difficulty. And as far as some tips for that pause, so we can take that pause, noticing your physical sensations, like you were talking about, is Wonderful. Is my gut tense, which probably means your nervous system is triggered? Or is my back really tight? Do I have a headache? What's going on in my body? And so that's going to really help you know that, oh, this might be a moment where I need some self compassion. Another thing to be mindful of to help take that pause to allow yourself to experience self compassion are your emotions. Are you feeling an emotion of insecurity? Are you feeling anxiety? Are you feeling disappointment? Are you feeling frustration? That means that you could use some self-compassion. I mean, if you're experiencing any of those emotions that I just listed, that's a time to give yourself compassion. And the third thing that's really good to notice are your thoughts. There's certain thinking cycles that we can identify ahead of time as our thinking cycles that indicate that we're in that zone. We're in that zone where we're probably putting ourselves down, or we're being hard on ourselves. There might be thoughts of, why did I do that? What is wrong with me? Why can't I be better? Being mindful of when those thoughts are instigated and saying, oh, okay, I'm in it. I'm having that experience. I'm going to take the pause and use some of the self-compassion.
When it comes to thoughts, is thoughts of shame and thoughts of not good enough. I am not doing all that I can do as a mom, as a caregiver. And I think recognizing that is the first step to sort of being able to pivot. I think in terms of emotions, those feelings of sadness and longing, sometimes really just wishing that things were different, recognizing that it's okay to feel those feelings, because I think as caregivers, as moms, we are trained by cultural messages and from our own family to really push that down so that you can focus on the child. But what that does when we swallow those emotions is they just show up in other ways. And they might show up with you losing your temper, raising your voice with your child, or maybe it turns into other coping mechanisms that aren't the best. It really is getting clear about how that shows up for you so that you're able to recognize it from a mindful space and pivot. So maybe instead of drinking multiple glasses of wine when you feel uncomfortable or you feel that sadness and that longing come up, you can transition to journaling or writing out your feelings. Sometimes I just do like a voice note on my phone if I just need to get something out and I may not have time to sit down and write it out how I'm feeling. It's really that inner dialogue, that inner self-talk that can really help to lift us out of some of these spirals. I see you. I see that you're doing the best that you can. I see that it's challenging, but even in that, you're giving yourself grace.
I love that. I see you. That's so much of what we're talking about with this pause. We're taking this pause to say, I see you. You're saying it to yourself. I see what you're going through. I see this. And that's also such a nice benefit of self-compassion practice is then it helps us to be more compassionate to other people. And then, how good that feels to say to yourself, I see me. I see what I'm going through. And then you're with someone else and you say, I see you. I see what you're going through. I wonder, what your back pocket self-compassion affirmations are. It's this idea that, we have a few of these affirmations metaphorically in our back pocket that we pull out when we need it. We usually have like maybe our top 4. What are your affirmations you keep in your back pocket?
Okay, this is sort of for soothing when I feel like, everything is spiraling out of control. I'll put my hand on my heart and I say, I am divinely guided. I am divinely protected. I am divinely loved. I am divinely held. So that helps to calm my nervous system down, mind, body, spirit, that whole connection. In terms of self-compassion, one of the things that I say to myself is, I am enough. The way that I show up is enough. The way that I love is enough. That's something that I've struggled with for a long time, feeling like I was good enough. It's something that I spiral to if I make a mistake. So I just remind myself that I am enough. There's another self-compassion meditation that I've been leaning into lately, and it's I am not defined by how much I get done in a day. Because this for me is I'm still working through it. It's a work in progress, but I'm like very focused on if you could see my to-do list, like all this stuff that I have to get done. Sometimes I get to the end of the day and feel like, oh man, I didn't get this, I didn't get that. But then it's like, no, come back. I am not defined by how much I get done in a day because it's so easy to fall into that trap. Again, we're in a productivity culture and we feel like we're defined by what we produce. But no, you came here worthy. You came here with gifts and talents and so much within you. You're not defined by what you get done in a single day. You are so much more than that.
I'm so glad you brought that up about productivity culture. It plays such a role in this. So this idea of I'm not enough. I mean, I don't think I have a client who doesn't have that come up. I mean, I think we all experience that. And I think it's because we live in this culture that is always pushing everyone to be more, to be more. And then as parents, we fall into this trap where we want to push our kids to be more because we want them to succeed in this culture that's all about being more. The thing is, the fallout of that is then we end up feeling like we're not enough. Compassion is such a good way to address that. Yeah. And then about this accomplishment. Oh my gosh. I mean, that is that whole subject of self-worth, right? Like we misassociate our worthiness with how much we produce. Like, come on, we need to really heal through that. I'm so glad you're on that healing journey and I'm doing the same thing. And just, it's a daily reminder. And that's actually something I use a lot in my meditation because I'm sitting there on my meditation cushion meditating and I'm thinking about work. And so I have to say, I'm enough. I'm enough. I'm worthy, even as I sit here and take a break from working. I'm worthy to do this. So important. Here are some of my back pocket self-compassion affirmations. I have a real issue with success and failure, feeling like a failure. And so one of mine is, it doesn't matter if I succeed or fail. What matters is that I love myself either way. That's one that just takes me off of the cliff, like, okay, let me come down to the ground. Another one is, it's okay to make a mistake. I'm human. Also, for some of those difficult emotions that come up, the grief, the sadness, abandonment, emotions like that, even though I feel abandoned, I'm loved. Even though I feel abandoned, I'm worthy. Even though I feel abandoned, I'm connected and a good person. And then my last favorite one is that like sense of humanity. As I feel this emotion, I am considering all the other humans who've ever felt this same way. So everybody should have their little list of affirmations that they've got in their back pocket they can pull out and use for these different situations. And another way to cue as an indicator that I need to use self-compassion is noticing and acknowledging what is difficult for you. And there's certain things that are just difficult for us. And that's a perfect circumstance to give ourselves compassion when we are met with difficulty. What we often automatically do is the opposite. We are hard on ourselves when we're met with difficulty. And some of the difficulties might be being around certain behavior, or it might be a difficulty might be when you make a mistake, or financial stress might be a difficulty, or not feeling like a good enough parent. It's good to be aware of, what are your personal difficulties? So, in those circumstances, self-compassion is the ticket.
Your last affirmation about being connected to other living beings, it just reminds me of the South African philosophy of Ubuntu. I am because you are, that each of us is inextricably linked and connected to the other. How much that expands our capacity for compassion, self-compassion, and then, that radiates outward and we're able to show up in compassion for other people because it's that common humanity. I was also thinking about Dr. Kristen Neff's statement that I've heard in one of her meditations around difficult emotions. This is a moment of suffering. That's a phrase that I come to when I deal with various challenges as well, because we are so often focused on just moving forward. Again, coming back to the pause. For me, sometimes those moments of suffering are listening to parents have long conversations with their children, and I'm not there yet with Nye. It hurts. It could be easy for me to kind of push past that, which I've done for years, but now I find myself in a space of just acknowledging that this is a moment of suffering. This hurts. I think sometimes the people who love us want to encourage us out of those feelings. And it's certainly nothing wrong with encouragement and focusing on the positive. But I think we can do that in a way that suppresses our emotions. And then, as I was saying earlier, it just comes back up. That's an act of self-compassion to just acknowledge that this is something that hurts me. In those hurts, in those wounded moments, there's a light that can enter us too, that connects us to other people who are dealing with challenges. If my husband and I never started going through these challenges with Nye, when motherhood looks different wouldn't be birth. That's the whole reason why it came to be. That Rumi quote, the wound is the place where the light enters you. All these things open us to so much. There's a richness there, even in the pain, that it can become a portal.
That's so true. That's why that vulnerability in that moment can open us up to that portal. It can allow that healing to start happening in those moments when we are really stretched and not feeling like our best self. It's actually those moments when there's part of ourself that's reaching out for healing. So those are the moments to really create space to open up to something beautiful. Thank you so much for being on the show and having this conversation. You offer so much wisdom and so much clarity for those of us who are on this journey and want to feel better and want to feel good about our parenting. And so please share with the listeners how they can follow you on social media. I know you have a Zoom event coming up that anybody from anywhere can participate in. Tell us about how we can connect with you.
Instagram is the best place, at When Motherhood Looks Different, all one word. The event that you mentioned, thank you so much, Sarah, for lifting that up, is our meet and chat on Zoom. Our focus is actually self-compassion. It's tips for inviting in, calling in more self-compassion on your mindful parenting journey. That's going to be October the 19th at 7 p.m. The link to sign up and register is in my bio, and it's absolutely free. So you can come get some tips, connect with other moms. Maybe it's a mom with chronic illness, or maybe it's a mom that's raising a kid who is neurodivergent or has other health challenges, but you'll be able to be in community with those other moms. And I'm also going to be announcing a workshop later this year.
What can they expect when they start working with you?
In all of our work together, whether you're with me for 4 sessions or 8 sessions, is we really try to get to the core of how you experience stress in your body and your mind and your spirit, and then what strategies can we implement to help you to cope with that stress so that you can be able to parent from a mindful place as opposed to reactivity. I talk to moms in DMs and provide information about resources and support if they need that. So my DMs are always open on When Motherhood Looks Different.
Thank you for this wonderful work that you are sharing with the world. It's amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Sarah, for empowering me to do this with your program. You really are making such a difference. I know I said that at the beginning of the interview, but I loved working with you, and I'm so thankful for the community that you're building and the way you're supporting so many of us.
You're very welcome. The Aware Mind podcast is a TSD mindfulness production. Please check out our show notes for upcoming events and links to additional resources. Please visit our website at tsdmind.org. That is T as in tame, S as in soothe, D as in dwell, mind as in mindfulness.org. And don't forget to follow us on Instagram at TSD_mindfulness.